I'm Jon Glasbrook Griffiths, and I'm the Vice Chairman of the Friends of Newport Museum and Art Gallery. The painting on the easel is called Opaque Images, and it's by the Swansea artist Evan Walters. And it was painted in 1948, and it is an oil on canvas. And it's in the collection of Newport Museum and Art Gallery, and it's a fairly unrepresentative example of Walters' work, but that's in many ways is what makes it interesting. And this is one that possibly was exhibited in 1948 in the National Society exhibition in London, and people, to be honest, were not very happy, and partly because of paintings like this, and then later ones, he's now rather forgotten, as it were, and which is a great shame, because actually there's nothing wrong with this picture at all. It's a very, it's a very nice picture now. But in 1948, even by the standards of British art, let alone Welsh art, it was pretty radical, and it was so far removed from what he'd done before that people thought he'd lost the plot. This is a more typical example of what classic fans of Evan Walters would expect to find. And this is a sort of a rough portrait sketch. This is the sort of thing that he would have knocked out in a couple of hours. It's an oil on canvas, and I suspect it is just a portrait of a local girl. It shows the kind of work that he was capable of doing, and what his fans expected him to do. You know, you create a style, and people like, if you collect an artist, you generally like them to carry on doing what they're doing. This girl writes a story of how she had a portrait done in a matter of a couple of hours, and he didn't stop talking. He would never stop talking. He'd be, painting at arm's length, but never stop talking, and it could be quite tiring for people. I mean, it was quite hard work, but he did it on purpose to animate people and to bring their faces alive, because that's how he brought out our characters. And he would talk about all sorts of, tell them stories, or bizarrely, he was a very good cricketer, and so he'd chat cricket with people and things like that. It's things you don't necessarily expect artists to do. He found portrait painting very boring after a while. He was very pleased that he managed to make a living out of it, and never, as I said, previously never had to teach or anything. But at the same time, he realised he was just doing nothing, not much more than an intellectual camera, really, and so he just got fed up of it, and I think he just thought, I've had enough of this, pleasing everybody else. I want to do some things for myself. But then the war came along, and he basically, apart from there was a shortage of paint amongst other things, but he also then sat on his own with his mum and dad in halfway up a mountain, decided that he just thought this is a chance to experiment, cut off from everybody else on his own, deciding that what we now call double image painting. He decided that he was sick and tired of painting traditionally as all painters had done in the past, with using perspective and other such things. And within that, he then just found that the sort of double images became interesting in themselves, rather than trying to be naturalistic and trying to reinvent perspective. He just decided that they became an interesting area of study in their own right, and so he then decided to go off down that route. I mean, there are clearly people in that. I mean, it's based on people, but he's abstracted them, and I think he became obsessed with playing with double images. The fact that he could turn his hand to anything is exciting, but in many ways it was his downfall. This was viewed as a massive departure, and for most people who had collected his work in the past, it was very disappointing to think that someone was squandering their talent so much on, as they saw it, going up a blind alley, from which, he didn't really ever return, as we discover later on. I imagine he would have taken any criticism about this pretty personally, to be honest. To a certain extent, he retired from public life, really. After the war, he never recovered his place again. And disappeared into obscurity. His work in South Wales, as much as anybody, even people we now consider to be famous, who were famous then, like Augustus John, didn't appear in the papers as much as Evan Walters did. Which is why I always say to people that he's the most famous Welsh painter that you've never heard of.